Okay, so welcome everybody tonight to the second Honours question session run by Honours Board Chair Bruce Girdwood. And tonight we're focusing on the Associate Honours level. So Bruce, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Let me just share. Am I sharing the right screen? I'll share that. Is that what you expect to see?
Yeah, we're seeing your the slide, not the PowerPoint.
Okay, great. And I'm just going to see if I can shift this across and make you guys a bit bigger. Okay, cool. All right. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. So just going to talk a little bit about the associate tonight, which is what everybody's here to hear about. The agenda is pretty straightforward. You know, there's the why, there's the what, and the how. So why we're here, why do we make photos, and why do we have an honours system? What is the honours system? What are the requirements for your set? And then how do you actually prepare? How do you get feedback if you before submitting, and then how we give you feedback if you need it afterwards. It's always good to remember why we make a photograph. It's when we make photographs ourselves, we are pretty well thinking about expressing ourselves in the way that we that we want to. So it's sharing your vision in a coherent way, and it's a personal expression, right? So when we look at it from an honours perspective, or any assessor of other people's, or anyone who comments on other people's work, we will always look at those images from our own perspective, because it's our life experience that dictates how we respond to an image. And we've also got to differentiate between the image, a good image, and a not so good image, and that's very different from an image that we like and an image that we don't like. So I might not like something because that's my personal taste, but I should be able to determine whether it is a well-made and a well-communicating image, whether I like it or not, and that's what I call appreciation. So the Honours Board has to be able to do that. And we are very sensitive to the fact that that people put their heart and soul into their photography, and when you put an associate set up, you're expressing your own feelings and views on the world through that visual medium, and that we will treat that with the utmost respect. So we will, we've spoken about this already, so I won't go through that anymore, but I think the key bit here is to help you increase your chances of success. So we don't have a percentage that we aim at in terms of successes. We've got a set of guidelines that set up the playing field, and if you get into that playing field and do yourself justice, then you should expect to get yourself your honours. So there's no limit to the numbers that go through. Okay, so I'm going to need to go and change this. The reason we have an honours system is that PSNZ has the purpose to promote the advancement of photographic craft and art in all its applications. That's the complicated version. The simple version is PSNZ likes to grow photographers, and the honours system is a way in which we can recognise your growth in photography, and there are three of them. The licentiate is the more the beginner one, the associate is more advanced, and the fellowship is about mastery. We'll talk about the associate. So we spoke about the guidelines. The question often comes up: is there a template you can use to gain your honours? I think the answer is straightforward no. And the reason the answer is no is that if we created a bunch of rules for you to comply with and then get your honours, everybody would be doing the same thing, and we'd be creating photographers of a very similar ilk. So we're not into mass production of the same thing. We very much about promoting the art and craft of photography, which is the expression yourself. So we provide the playing field so we get some consistency from which we can assess images, and then within that playing field, you can play whatever game you like. So it might look like a rugby field, but you can perform a ballet dance or, I don't know, play netball, whatever you like. So PSNZ is to foster the creation of artists, and each one of those are unique. Expression of your own vision. Those guidelines give you that framework, and too much prescription stifles creativity. So the guidelines can be found at this link over here, and we'll publish. It's very easy to find on the website. You just go to photography.org.nz, find honours, and then you look for the guidelines underneath. It's really important that you spend time reading the guidelines. Don't use this presentation as a substitute for doing so, because there's a lot of detail in there. We've worked our way through it over some years, and it's now at a point where it should be really helpful. So it gives you the guidelines around what's expected, but it also tells you about print sizes, digital and digital resolutions and those sorts of things. So it's important that you read that. Don't use this talk as a substitute. So what are the key elements of the guidelines? At the associate level, we talk about advanced craft. So I can use my camera to apply advanced techniques to show more than craft. I'm starting to become an artisan with general skills, and I'm exploring who I am. So there are a few keywords in there. Advanced techniques. So this is a real step up from the licentiate, which is competency. You're starting to do advanced techniques to communicate, start to express yourself, and then these words, general skills, those are really important, because a lot of people think the associate is a mini fellowship, and a mini fellowship is people able to express themselves uniquely, and fellowship is more of a thesis style approach, whereas the associate is to show general skills at an advanced level. So we'll come back to that. So don't think of the associate as a mini fellowship, it's an advanced licentiate. Okay, so the key areas for the associate is your demonstration of photographic proficiency, and that's a step up from the licentiate. And then diversity is the other aspect, and that diversity is about showing your general skills in photography. So we can show that you can apply advanced skills in a wide range of circumstances, and then we're looking to you to be able to put a portfolio together, so a cohesive set of photographs. And these concepts can be hard to get grips with, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But initially, I think proficiency is something we need to understand a little bit better. So what makes a good photograph? In general, you've got this thing called visual design. So it's the elements in your photograph that hold it together and start bringing forward, for example, your focal point and making all of the other secondary things and putting them in their place. I liken it to building a table, for example. So a table requires a flat surface and 4 legs that are level and create that flat surface that you can work. But if you simply take a piece of wood as a flat surface and a number of legs and screw them in, that gives you a table. It's perfectly functional, but it does the job. That's good craft. If you want to turn that table into something that's a lot more exciting, you can start laminating bits of wood, you can start decorating, you can start doing all sorts of interesting things, excuse me, and that's more in light of composition and that you're starting to make an art piece. So you're starting to arrange things in a way that are not just functional, they're not just providing information, they're starting to provide information in a way that is unique to you. So it's communicating information, it's communicating emotion or feeling, and it's done in a way that has an individual style. And if you're starting to show your style, you're starting to show us how you see the world in the way that you see the world, and starting to be pretty true to yourself. So that gives you an idea of the sorts of things that we look at for proficiency. In the associate, we're looking for you to move away from this craft space into this composition space, so that you're starting to show advanced techniques to do your communication. You're showing some individuality. At the fellowship level, it's all about this individuality and advanced mastery of your composition and art. So hopefully that gives you a little sense of where we go with proficiency. Diversity is important because the guidelines, at least at the associate and licentiate levels, require you to show general skills in photography. And here are some examples of how you can do that. So if you think about the use of lenses and lens settings, you could use a wide angle lens and a close-up lens. You could vary your depth of field by changing your aperture, and you can show us how you can do that effectively in a range of circumstances. You could also be using different lighting to show how you manage light at different lighting conditions. So you're demonstrating exposure, and you also can use light and exposure to create mood. And then again, the other area which you can exploit for demonstration of diversity is moving through different genres. So you could do nature, you could do macro, you could do landscape, portraiture, documentary, and all those sorts of things. So I'm not saying that you should show all of these things. What we're looking for is your versatility as a photographer at the advanced level. And if you only got 12 images to put together for the associate, but within that, show us a diversity of these kinds of things. And of course, you might also think of other ways of doing that, and that's absolutely fine. So these are just examples of how you can think about diversity. Are there any questions at this point, Paul? Portfolio. The portfolio can be quite difficult because we don't learn this in our clubs very often. I've only come across a few clubs who have portfolio competitions. So we tend to focus on a single image. So we're asking you to show a slightly advanced skill here with portfolio, and it is about putting your images together in a way that looks like a coherent body of work. So if you have a number of images which all look very different to each other, and it looks like a higgledy-piggledy mash of imagery, that's not showing the portfolio. But if you arrange them and pay attention to the composition of your overall set, from a color, from a tone, from a those kinds of perspectives, then you're getting closer to it. And the statement below talks about a portfolio starting strongly and taking the viewer on a journey. That's one way of looking at it. It's not the only way of looking at it. And one image can lead to another via links of shape, color, texture, tone, subject matter, etc. And consistent quality is essential for a portfolio. So if you have an image that is very different in quality to another one, or very different in color or tone, and really sticks out, then that sort of starts to dominate the scene, the portfolio, and then people will just go to that one image and they won't look at the other ones. So we need to just give that some thought, and we'll give you some examples about how this works. Prints are viewed as one body of work. So we put them onto a set of easels. Excuse me. You're only allowed 3 rows. And so arrange them in those 3 rows in a way that puts your set to best effect. And then we look at the whole set at one time. From a digital image perspective, they are viewed one after the other. So you don't see them in the same way as prints. So we have to consider the flow of the set from one image to the next as the way in which you put together your portfolio. And then of course, the overall impression that's left in the viewer's mind. So one image to the next is what drives that portfolio, and think carefully about the transition from one image to the other.
Bruce, we have a question.
Sure.
How many photos need to be different, or how many differences do you need to demonstrate to show diversity in our set?
I don't think there are any hard and fast rules. If you had 5 images of 5 portraits that are in the same pose, or roughly the same pose, with the same lighting and the same cropping, that's not, you've wasted 5 opportunities to demonstrate diversity. So it's okay to have 1 or 2 similar, but show us your diversity throughout your set. So depending on how you choose to do it, it varies from person to person, but limit the number of very similar images. So you might have a similar composition, for example, but if you vary the lighting and your camera settings, that is showing diversity. So if you could get your licentiate, your associate through landscape photography, for example, but photograph in different lighting conditions, photograph zoom in, wide angle, those sorts of things. So you can, but just pay attention to the use of your camera and the use of lighting to show us that we could expect to be able to put you in most situations, and you'd be able to figure out how to make a reasonable image out in those situations. So that's showing those general skills. Anything else, Paul?
No.
Right. So themes, this is in a sense related to the question that's just come up. Themes are tempting because it helps with the portfolio aspect of your submission, but the downside of a theme could easily be diversity. So if you want to have a theme, say of portraits, make sure that you are using different lighting conditions, using different lenses, different backgrounds and environments within which you are photographing your portraits, and show us that you've got general skills. So it's not to say that a theme is out. If you do a theme, just be careful that you also pay attention to diversity. Right, so that's it. If we can talk more about that if people have questions. Okay, so going back to the guidelines. So I've spoken quite a lot about the different aspects of proficiency, diversity, and portfolio. Those are all laid out in a lot of detail in the guidelines. So please go and look at those, and feel free to exercise your creative skills within those guidelines. And the more creative you can be while demonstrating these areas, the greater it will be for us to enjoy your imagery. Okay, so next thing is about putting it all together. Our experience and observation over years is that it's quite good if you have a plan. It's very obvious, particularly at the associate level. If you go to your archive and try and pull together a range of images from your archive, it's quite often very obvious, because we don't necessarily think about making those images within the context of a portfolio for an associate, for an associate. So have an idea, then plan out your idea, and then go and execute that plan. And you'll find that as you're executing, you will come back and it won't quite be what you thought it might be in the original visualization. So then develop it and evolve it until you get to what you want. And you will find also from time to time that you will have an image which is absolutely fantastic and you'll want to put it in at all costs. But think about how that fits in with the portfolio. And sometimes you have to be pretty brutal. And some of your best images might not go in because they don't fit with the rest, and it demonstrates a wide variety of skills. But also it might be that one that is so standout that it's the only one that people look at. So those are some thoughts. Not everybody wants to start from the beginning, and some of you might already have had some ideas in your head that you've been quietly working out over years. So when I did mine, I knew that one of the areas that I love photographing was the sand dunes of Namibia, and I had been doing that for a long time, and I had been developing my style in that space, and I knew that I had a good archive of images that I had thought of as a project as opposed to a portfolio, and it was likely that I'd be able to put an associate together from that. So that worked okay. But in general, it's not a random thing. It's more of a project approach. Okay,
Bruce,
any questions?
Yeah, Bruce, yep. Is it acceptable to submit a set in a particular style, as in all abstract, all ICM, or whatever else? Oh, that's an interesting one. That's getting quite thematic, isn't it? So the theme is the ICM or abstract. Like I said earlier,
if you do that, make sure you can show us a diversity of skills. And I would recommend, although I wouldn't be absolute about this, because people have surprised us in the past as to how they interpret some of those techniques, but be very careful that you're not showing off a technique rather than general skills in photography, right? So I'm not saying you can't do it, but if you want to exploit that technique, then make sure you also show us general skills in photography. If you are going to go in camera movement for 12 images, how will we know that you can take a nice sharp image that can communicate, for example? But you might show us a whole bunch of things with your ICM. I don't know. So yeah, think it through. Anything else?
Not at this stage.
All right. So let's go to the website and grab some photographs. And we'll, last night we had some problem with the website. Hopefully we'll be better off today. Honours. I'll bring it across in a tick. Okay. Right, can you all see these images?
Yes.
Okay, so right, so this is a photograph of the layout. This is Anna Mandino. I think this was probably the year before last. So you can see that Anna has photographed everything with monochrome. She's toned everything pretty similarly, and so it looks like a nice cohesive set. And the layout is quite interesting because you can see on the top row, the outside images are fairly static, so they hold you in at the edges, and then you move quite happily into this lovely moody landscape. So we've got some close-up photography there, a little, some good reflections and light on the water, which has worked very nicely over there, and an abstract composition and an abstractish landscape. And then on the second row, we've gone a bit wider, and she's used this pole as a hold-in, and she's used this tree to push us into the middle row, into the middle of that row. And in here, there's reasonably static images again. So once you're in the middle, you go to these ones, you might go to this one again, and then you work yourself back and then back in again. And again, there's an environment, sort of a landscape type image with interesting lighting and a good story. And we've got some abstract here, and I can't remember what that was about, and this is too small to see. On the bottom, we've got portraits holding the set in, and they are interesting ones. One is showing an environmental portrait, and this is showing a bit more personality. And then in this row, you've got this beautiful light, beautiful perspective, and then something quite unusual and abstract, which asks you a lot of questions. So it holds together nicely as a portfolio. The photographic techniques here have been wide and varied, and they've all been done very well. And you've got good diversity because this photographer has shown us that she can photograph close up, she can photograph landscapes, she can go wide angle, and she can tell stories with people and other things. So a good associate. Is there any question, Paul?
No. Right,
and this person here, Anne-Marie, I'll see if I can just increase the size of that for you, has come up with, and she's entitled it a diverse set. Last night the question came up as to whether we mind titles and things like that. The answer is absolutely no, we don't mind at all, and there's no expectation under the guidelines for a title. But if you do use titles, expect us to engage with that title, and that's all fine. So this photographer called it a diverse set, so clearly directing us to see the diversity in her set because she's worked really hard at that, which is great. And then she's also given us a little artist statement. So that's also fine. You don't have to for the associate at all. So looking at the set, another question that came up last night was, It doesn't matter if you mix black and white with color, and I think the answer is absolutely no. That doesn't matter at all. You can see in the set that she's integrated the black and white ones within the set, and they sit in there very nicely. This arrangement of landscape. This is really nice that that Anne-Marie has shown us that she can photograph in different formats. So here you've got the landscape format, here you've got a portrait format, and here you've got a square format. And in putting her set together, she's exploited those formats to help her with the composition of her portfolio. So portrait here and a portrait there with some squares in between, and she's fitted in the landscapes above, and then the bottom row supports that very nicely. So that's really careful and nice thinking in terms of arrangement. Photographic, and then also look at how she is using the waterfall to pull you in here, and the dynamic of this image to push you in there. And again, the caterpillar is pulling you in, the clivier is pulling you in, and then you've got a static image in the middle which holds you. It's like you get pulled in and then boom, you stop in the middle, and then you work your way out, and then you move yourself to the next row. And again, you've got things holding you in on the outsides, and in the next layer, and then you've got another image over here, which although it's not static, it does pull you through in this diagonal, takes you up to this line. That diagonal moves you up into that line, and then you can move around the set quite nicely. So some really careful thought put together in putting this set together. From a diverse point of view, I think it's fair to say that she's shown advanced skills in portraiture. She's shown that she can tell a story in some form of abstraction. She can tell a good story with nature and landscapes, and she can even pull in a cityscape. And here's some interesting lighting techniques that have been used on this wagon and at interesting time of the day. So again, advanced skills, telling good stories in each image, really good exposure and good use of light to actually pull the images out. Diversity is rich in the set, in the sense that the subject matters, the techniques, the lighting, and also the formats used show that she's got quite an arsenal behind her photography. Yep.
Bruce, there's a question. Can you please comment on the flow of this set of prints compared with digital flow? Okay.
So we'll get to the digital in a minute, and then you'll see the difference. And if you've still got a question, please ask. So I think, if you've, one after the other. So when you put these images together and a print, you're not looking at them one after the other. So you're not progressing from this image to that image, then this image. You're looking at the whole and the way it holds you together. With the digital, it's one after the other. Now we'll demonstrate that in a few minutes. Okay, so here's another associate. Control, let's make this a bit smaller. Okay, so again, use of color in black and white and different formats. And you can see this photographer has given us a good base layer with some good things going on. He has shown us that he can look in close and make some really sensitive photography. So these are similar subjects, but telling very different stories. And these are sandwiched in with a different aspect of street photography. And then we've got cityscapes that hold you in very nicely from the left to the right into these central images, which again hold you. And then he's showing us that he can do good landscape photography and hold you in, and some in-camera movement or multiple exposures to tell stories. So again, a good set of images, diversity of skill, good layout, and good diversity. Let's see if we can look at digital. Okay, so these, what I might do, let's go. All right, let's look at this one. So in the 2022, we've put them up as a slideshow. So I'll go to 2022 now as well. But if you look at this at this layout, you can see how Simone has worked the blues. So if you're seeing this image followed by that image, you'll see that it fits very nicely and the tone works really nicely. And then this image exploits the whites in this image. And so as you move from that image to that image, it fades away quite nicely in a good way. And then using the whites and the birds to create a similar feel across. So that transition to this image would work very nicely. And then exploiting circles. So we'll go from a circle to a circle, and again, look at how the blues have flowed through. And now we're doing a transition from the blues to some warmer colors. And then you're using that warmer color to flow into this one here, and you start to change the texture. And that texture then moves into this texture, and she's darkening up as she goes and introducing new tones. And those tones follow through into these tones, which follow through into those tones. And then these tones of brown are covered here, but we're going back to blue, and then we're going to increase the blue again. So you can see that she's thought really carefully about how one image flows from one image flows to the next image. We've also got a nice diversity of imagery here. So we've got city abstracts, we've got nature, we've got other abstracts, we've got portraiture, we've got landscape, and all of them have been done in an interesting style, which is telling us that she's developed her own techniques, and she's using those techniques pretty well. Other thing that's noticeable here, she's used square all the way through, so that also adds a nice consistency. Last night we had a question about whether changing formats matter, and they don't, because changing formats enables you to show diversity, but just think about the flow from one to the other, and don't have 20 different or 12 different formats. Just deliberately use the formats and the change of those formats from image to image, and make it look as if you're deliberately doing that. We'll look at one more here. So again, this set is diverse again. And if you look at the flow, this is quite a colorful image followed by quite a light image followed by quite a dark image. So that flow can be seen to be quite jarring. Then the flow starts to work quite nicely as you transition the colors. And then you have a little bit of a break in the flow over here, but then it picks up nicely through there again. So I think this demonstrates that she's looked at the flow, but hasn't completely achieved it all the way through. Excuse me. But it also shows that we're not absolute in terms of perfection. So we don't expect perfection. We look at your photographic proficiency, we look at your diversity, and we look at your flow. And if your flow isn't perfect, but you've got really good diversity and you've shown good camera skills, and you've shown that you are you've thought quite carefully about the flow, but haven't got it quite right, you'll be fine. We accept that that's okay. And we're just looking for skills. And I must say, at the associate level, we expect higher performance when it comes to these sorts of things. So if you've got the flow right for the first half and then goes to pop, then it's not going to get you through. This set again, see how it starts dark, and your perspective is the same, but as you're going, you're starting to broaden your perspective until eventually, and the tones are changing until eventually you get something light. So that gives you another example. I'm going to go to this year's associate sets. I'm going to look for a digital set, right? So this then shows you how we flow. You've got a nice light image, interesting composition, beautiful story, and you see how it flows from this one to that one. The lighting is the same, the contrast is the same, and there's even the circular composition on the right that follows through. And again, we're transitioning the black and white, but starting to get a bit more fulsome in the composition and start to occupy more space with darker things. And again, you see how the ship transitions into the bull and the rider. So there's a nice transition there. And the tones follow through to this one, even though the composition is quite different. And you can see how that diagonal flows through quite nicely. And we're just transitioning into the colors, but you've got that horse theme and the diagonal flowing through. And then This is picking up the two horses, but getting a bit closer and darker. Maybe a little bit of a jarring flow, but the tones are still quite nice. So it's not too strong. And then we are picking up some of the orange tones again in this image as you get closer, and the orange flows through to there again in a different technique with the camera movement. And then we move into the landscape, and off we go. So if we look at that as a flow, this row flows really well. It moves quite nicely through to here. And then these last three images, in my view, are a little, the flow is not so great. So if Janice had taken this image and put it right at the end and put this image right next to it, the flow from that image to that image would have been better, and the flow from this image to that image would have been a little bit better. So there's a little variation there that could have been applied to improve that flow. But overall, we can see she's thought carefully about it. She's got diversity, there's good camera skills, and we are quite comfortable that we put her in a range of circumstances, she'll be able to take an advanced photograph. Okay. Right, so there's a nature one here. And nature also needs to show diversity. It also needs to have a portfolio approach, and of course the proficiency needs to be good, but there's this added element in nature which is telling the story of the animal and its circumstances. All right, so here we have you know, close in of this bird. The blacks flow through, but can you see there's a bit of a contrast shift, but still a competent bird photograph in a very different environment, doing something different. And again, another image with different sets of behaviors in a different environment. And so we go, here's a bit of landscape coming into the background. So in this image, we can see that Joe is able to show the environment of this bird very nicely as well. And the use of depth of field sort of closes off the foreground, gives it that lovely line across there with the albatross, but puts the background into a bit of a soft focus, which keeps us focusing in on the bird, which is a good technique. And this is showing nesting habits, slightly different environment and a different lighting condition, different animal doing something different in another environment, and again showing the dab checks in doing their thing, getting into the ocean, an ice environment and a different set of relationships. Yeah, so this one might not be as good a nature photograph as some of the others, because it looks as if the animal is engaging with the photographer, and from a nature perspective that's a little bit weak. And again, you know, showing a different creature, different environment, different lighting, and a good use of depth of field to bring them forward. Okay, so there's a little bit of trouble with the flow over here. It might have been useful to take this bird and place it somewhere else that it fits better with the white background, and then keep the darker ones up front. But it's the only place in the set where that flow is broken down, in my opinion, anyway. So that gives you an idea of where we might land ourselves. All right. Any questions? Because I've largely, I can go through more examples if you want, but I'm going to start demonstrating more and more of the same thing as we go.
Bruce, there's no comments coming in from the group, but just, I guess, a general comment on that last set.
Yes.
So two of the images, the wings were clipped. And quite often, like clubs, when you see bird photos, the judges will say you've clipped the wings.
Yes, I think the one, is this the one that you're talking about? You know,
that one and the next one.
Yeah, so it may be a bit lucky. I don't know, but I think from my point of view, they look deliberately clipped, and it looks like you're trying to focus in on the detail here. So if they had just been marginally clipped, it would have been a little bit more problematic. So you can see that this photographer does get quite close crops. I think in this situation, the main story is over here. And for me, having those wings clipped doesn't really matter because it's not detracting from the main story and the behavior that we've got, because you can still assume what's going on out there. And so the photographer is drawing us in. And you know, if you were super strict from a nature point of view, you might have a problem with that. But I think it still tells a story. But you can still see, you know, this photographer is a tight cropper anyway, and that's not the worst thing in the world. You'll also see that some sets are significantly better than others, but I think the main thing is to get over the threshold, and you know, there's 6 of us, and it goes to the vote, and if somebody didn't agree, they didn't agree, but on average it all got through. Yep, hope that helps, Paul.
We have a question from Michelle. If you think you have 12 images, is there any way you can get advice before submitting?
Okay, you can't get advice from the Honours Board because they'd be conflicted when they're assessing it, so you'd have that bias coming through. My suggestion is that you read the guidelines really carefully, you own your work, and make sure and take the time and effort to express yourself. Especially at the associate, you should be competent at showing your advanced skills, and you should have your own mind about photography, but completely understand why feedback is important. The question for me is when you get feedback. I would not personally try and get feedback at your idea stage. Those are your ideas. Then as you evolve and execute and you get to the point where you are starting to get comfortable with your set, then I think it's a good time to start asking someone to give you some feedback, but be specific about the feedback that you want. Don't go there and ask them whether they think that this will pass or not. Just feedback on, you know, does it feel like a portfolio? Is there something in there that sticks out that you're not noticing? So things that you are biased about because you can't look at your own images objectively, those sorts of things start to come through, and you can ask them open questions like, you know, does this set hold together well? Does it communicate well? Are there any images that are stronger than others? Just test does it show diversity? All those sorts of things. There is also the Facebook page, which Paul will talk about, which you can ask questions. But I'd say be really clear about your objective, read the guidelines really well, have a plan, and then close to the end, start asking a couple of people that you trust that'll give you some fair feedback, some open questions. One of the things that I'm a bit wary of is there are a lot of experts out there that haven't read the guidelines, and then they'll start giving you feedback based on what they think an honour should be. And that's the bit that I'm trying to protect you from here with my answer.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I'll post the link on the Facebook page tomorrow, Michelle, to the private group that we established last year for APSNZ. And it's a useful group literally to do what Bruce has said, to get second opinions. And the advantage with that group is that they're all people who are reasonably current at getting this particular level. While mentors are sort of encouraged, there is an issue that if you get somebody who got their APSNZ or even their fellowship set a number of years ago, that they may not be aware of how the Honours Board is now assessing.
Yeah, so picking up on that point, what we are trying to do, and we've been working very hard at it. So we've spent a lot of time tidying up the guidelines so that they are communicating well. If you have any questions about the guidelines or you are confused about what's in there, please give one of the Honours Board a call. I'm very happy to receive a call, and we'll explain what we mean. and we'll use that that exchange to tighten up the guidelines better. Because what we're trying to do is be as consistent as we possibly can in the application of those guidelines, so that as the years go by, we start developing a set of good examples that people can look at and be confident that if they are looking at a set that has passed in the future, it's going to be, you know, you can look at it and you can learn from it and you can apply those learnings into your set. I'm not saying copy them, but it gives you an idea of what is successful. And if you apply that then in your sets, that's really good. In the past, there has been some inconsistency in the application of the guidelines, and that has been confusing to people. So while I've been chair of the Honours Board, every year we have an induction with the board, and we spend quite a lot of time talking about what we mean by diversity, what we mean by photographic proficiency for each one of the honours, and how we're going to think about the portfolio. We also talk about, where's, if you've got one or two images that are not quite up to mark, but everything else is, are we going to let it through? What's that threshold? Those sorts of things. We also talk about our culture, because for me, it's really important that the board is able to have a conversation about imagery and to hear different perspectives and to be able to change their mind if the perspective that their colleague is putting in front of them, and it's a perspective that they hadn't seen. So because we're 6, it's an even number, and the board members are all diverse. They've got very different skills and backgrounds and photography styles. So because of that, we're actually able to look at a wide range of images and give different perspectives. So I might look at a set and it doesn't make any sense to me, and I think, oh dear, this is not communicating very well, and I give it a pass. But somebody else, or all 4 of the other people, 5 of the other people on the Honours Board give it a go, and well, I don't give it a pass, but they do. And then I'm going, oh, hell, what's going on here? And then we have a conversation. So I'd be an extreme one, and I might just say, why do you think this is really working well? And they'll explain to me, and then suddenly I see something that I hadn't even thought of because it's outside of my experience zone. And when I get to appreciate that, then I could change my vote. And that matters when it's a 3-3, right? And we'll always have a conversation when there's a 3-3. And it's at that point when sometimes somebody will talk about the set as from a particular perspective, and that could trigger a few thoughts in somebody else's head, and they could change their vote at the next. And while we talk about culture, I expect the board to be able to not stand on a soapbox and passionately try and sell a set because they think it's great. I expect people to talk calmly about their perspective, and I expect everybody else to quietly listen and absorb and use that information as a learning experience. And when everybody that wants to talk has talked, then we'll do another vote and we'll see what happens. But we have to listen to each other, but we have to own our own vote.
Bruce, a couple of questions have come in.
Yes.
Okay. Is it possible that a licentiate portfolio could have been sufficiently advanced for an associate submission? And how do you know that your portfolio demonstrates sufficiently advanced techniques?
I think one of the yes, sometimes licentiates do have advanced skills demonstrated, but remember the licentiate's only 10 images, the associate is 12. So it's not always an easy thing to just take that licentiate and put it through to an associate the next year, and I wouldn't recommend that. But yes, sometimes I think if you go to national convention, you can look at some of the licentiates and you think, oh hell, that's better than some of the associates. And that's because it's shown advanced skills, and probably sometimes really advanced skills, but they've only applied for the licentiate. So we don't set a standard at each, we don't look at the sets and then set a standard. We talk about the standard before we start, and then everything that gets over that standard gets through. So you could see a wide range of standards in any one of the licentiates. Did I answer the full question there, Paul?
It answered the first bit of it. I guess the second one is, how do you know that your portfolio demonstrates sufficiently advanced technique?
Okay, so I think there's no straightforward answer to that, but what I would say is go and look at the example sets on the website like we have been, and that gives you an idea, right? But again, you know, set your own standard too. Look at the sets. If you think you can do better, that's great.
And another question, very much linked to the slide we've currently got.
Yeah.
For a nature set, would the vote of an experienced nature judge carry more weight than the others who do not have this experience?
No, but what the nature judge would do is explain the set. So, for example, if a nature set comes up and the so the process that we use on the honours board is the set goes up, we all go and have a look at the images, whether it be digital or print. There's not a word said. When everybody's had the time to spend as much time with the print set, or they've asked to repeat the slideshow as many, the digital set as many times as they want, or gone to each individual image that they want to look at again, we have a vote. And when the vote is done, say it is a nature set, and it's a marginal vote. Anybody in the team can turn around and say, this is a nature set. I would like some advice from the specialist nature person on the panel before we finalize this vote. And then they'll ask the questions of the specialist nature judge, and their conversation will ensue. And then I'll ask the team if they want to have another vote, and if they feel that they need to have another vote because they've learned something through the advice and the feedback from the nature judge, then we have another vote. And but people still own the vote. But it is about clarification of behavior, clarification of the special needs of nature and wildlife, which the individuals might not know. Currently, we do not have a specialist nature judge on the honours board because we haven't been able to find one that's also got a fellowship, which is a requirement. So we have a specialist advisor. And so every time we have a nature set up and people need some explanation about what's going on and whether it's good nature work, our specialist advisor will give us that feedback, and then we'll make our own judgments based on that as to whether we're going to change our vote or not. So I hope that helps.
That's good.
Okay, so Steph's put up a note here about putting the questions to everyone rather than directly to Paul. Okay, so I think this assessment process, I've largely covered that, but it's a positive process. We don't start with the mindset that let's find fault here so that we can dismiss it. We start with a mindset which is a positive one, and we're looking for reasons to put it through while still maintaining the standard, so that everyone who gets an award or the distinction can value that over time, and everyone that's had it in the past can continue to be proud of what they've achieved. Right, that's largely what I wanted to say, Paul. This is this is the bit that I was talking about with the board. We don't expect the board members to stand on either end of these, these polls, if you like, and argue the toss without listening to the other side. Otherwise, we'll all just end up at war, and that's not the objective. There's your honours board, and you can see in there that we've got a range of skills and experience, all fantastic photographers in their own right, and all very, very different. And last year we had John Reed as our nature advisor. All right, any more questions?
Not at present.
Okay, well, I'm largely done and we've just done an hour.
Okay, hang on. We do have one question just come in. Do you take into account what gear people use? E.g., if you're using an entry-level DSLR?
Kate, to be honest with you, I wouldn't have a clue what camera you've used, whether it be an iPhone, whatever. And you know, I think at the end of the day, it's the image that counts. And if you've got a camera, I mean, I got my fellowship using literally a throwaway camera because of what I wanted to do with it. But I also used a technique that means nobody would have, it doesn't matter what camera I use, it doesn't have to be a fancy one. But if you are doing micro photography that needs to be pen sharp, great depth of field, and etc., then make sure you're using the appropriate equipment. There's nothing wrong with an entry-level DSLR. They can take fantastic photographs, and you could even do your whole set using your cell phone if you do it well.
That's great. The one question that hasn't come up tonight, but did last night and is relevant to this level is, do you have to go through the LPSNZ before you do your APSNZ?
Okay, and the answer to that is no, you don't. But we've kept stats over the years, and you will no doubt be aware that the associate has got the lowest success rate of any of the honours. Well, no, maybe not the fellowship, but it's got a much lower success rate than the licentiate. And that has been very frustrating for people over the years. Our stats show that if you've done the licentiate before you do an associate, you've got a greater chance of getting through the associate because you've already had some experience by doing the licentiate, and the step up is not as hard as it is as going from zero. So, you know, if you're really confident, nobody's saying you can't, but our experience is that licentiate to associate is more successful than from nothing to an associate. Pleasure.
Okay, last opportunity to ask any more questions. Otherwise, we will thank Bruce for his time and wish everybody a good night.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing your submissions. Quite a bunch tonight, Paul.
Very quiet bunch, yeah. Yeah.